Welcome to a course in jazz piano. Thanks a lot for signing up for this course, and I will do my very best to help you understand jazz piano and to be able to get good in playing jazz. Before we get started, let's have a look at some practical things. How this course is organized. I will give you a new lesson every 10 days. I will also send you an email about this as a reminder for you. And the reason why we do it like this is to help you get the just right amount of time to practice what I teach. This is also an interactive course, meaning I will ask you questions so you learn in the best way possible. Also, sometimes I'll let you choose what song to play. And what do I mean by interactions? Well, for example, I could say, "You look great today." And what would be your response to that? You're welcome. I can also measure what you've said during this course, and your feedback is really important to me. And I want to know all I can do to make this course working for you the best way possible. So please be honest about what you think is good and what you think should be better. Is that okay for you? Oh, really? Thank you. I can also measure what you've said during this course, and your feedback is really important to me. I want to know all I can do to make this course working for you the best way possible. So please be honest about what you think is good and what you think should be better. Is that okay for you? Okay, great. Thank you. The next thing I will show you is that there is a menu bar right here, and the menu bar is designed for two things. You can go directly to the practicing session next time you're logging in, or you can skip to the next chapter if you think that what I teach you is sometimes too basic, or if you want to repeat something, you can jump back to previous sessions. If you're a gold member, you might send me and my team questions, upload recordings of yourself, and more. We will then give you feedback based on your progress, scoring, and personal advice. I will tell you more on this in a later lesson, but for now, you should look for this button to submit a ticket. Again, thank you for signing up. Let's begin. What is jazz? Jazz is like a musical language with many dialects. If you study jazz, you'll see that there are extremely many ways to express jazz. If you listen to jazz from the early stages, you'll see that jazz used to be something completely different before than it is today. In other words, there has been an evolution, and the way people play jazz is still developing today. Also, if you ask 80 people what is jazz, you'll get at least 81 different answers. So, what is jazz to you? To me, jazz is like a language we speak to express ourselves. In jazz, you're using the core elements to tweak the music. And these are the core elements in music. It's melody, harmony, rhythm, and dynamics. This is done by improvisation. Keep this in mind. Improvisation is about creating tension and release, like all other music. In other words, you create something, then you create something else based on this. To be able to improvise, it's a smart thing to ground yourself in the history of jazz. So that's why we study jazz, the past, to have something to evolve from. So when we evolve from the roots in jazz, we hopefully become innovative, and then we experiment with the musical core elements. Here's another question for you. Who is the best jazz pianist in the world? Well, that was a trick question. Jazz is an individual art form. Have you ever noticed that Keith Jarrett, Oscar Peterson, Bill Evans, and Herbie Hancock or any other jazz musician sound totally different from each other? I think your goal and my goal should always be to be able to find our own unique voice, our own unique way of playing. So I hope I can contribute to help you to play more like yourself. Let's start repeating some basic jazz theory. Well, before we go into jazz theory, let's start with some simple basic theory. When I started out, I had big holes in my knowledge. These holes are good to fill up. But if you don't think you need this repetition, feel free to jump to the next session. The diatonic scale is the scale we're all familiar with, meaning this is the scale most of the music is built over in the major part of the world. This is the scale that goes from C to C on the white keys, for example. This scale has a sequence of whole steps and half steps. So from C to D would be a whole step, from D to E would be another whole step, E to F a half step, and so on. So the diatonic scale from C to D a whole step, D to E a whole step, E to F a half step, F to G a whole step, G to A whole step, A to B a whole step, B to C a half step. However, this series of intervals or scale you could play from any key, of course, not only from the key of C. That leads us to the genius circle of fifths. The circle of fifths is a system that shows us how the sharps and flats are connected. I have to say, I had been playing for a long time before I understood how this worked, and if you do understand this, it gives you an enormous sense of freedom to play in any key. The next thing we should look at is, what is an interval? An interval is the space between two notes. So for example, the space between the C sharp and the E would be a minor third. This is another example. Between C and A is also a minor third. So it's both ascending and descending. One of the intervals happens to be a fifth. The space between C and G is a fifth. The space between D and A is a fifth. Now, you know what a fifth is. You may download the sheet for all the other intervals in the download section too. Now let's put in a circle here. Let's call it the circle of fifths. The first diatonic scale is the C scale. Again, that's the scale from C to C on the white keys. If we move the scale up a fifth, we'll start from G. So let me show you how that looks like. Let me play for you the C scale first. Once again, it's a whole step, and then it's a whole step, and then it's a half step, and a whole step, and a whole step, and a whole step, and a half step. In the key of G, there will also need to be the same pattern since we're moving up the whole scale. So in the key of G will be also a whole step, another whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, and a whole step, and a half step. And there you have your first sharp, a black key. So we moved up the fifth. What do you think would be the next key or scale in the circle of fifths? Not quite. It's the key of D. And if we continue the same way, we'll get to the key of F sharp. We see that the pattern is, if you go to your right in the circle of fifths, you end up with more and more sharps. So remember this. One, it's one new sharp for each fifth you go up. Second, you keep your previous sharps when you add new ones. Third, it will always be the seventh note in the scale that is sharpened. Yeah, you're right, it's the key of D. And if we continue the same way, we'll get to the key of F sharp. We see that the pattern is, if you go to your right in the circle of fifths, you'll end up with more and more sharps. So remember this. One, it's one new sharp for each fifth you go up. Second, you keep your previous sharps when you add new ones. Third, it's always going to be the seventh note in the scale that is sharpened. Thank you for asking me. What about the left side? It works the same way. Remember, we are transposing the diatonic scale around the keyboard. So if you go from C to F, then you play the same scale from F. Again, it's got to be a whole step from F to G, a whole step from G to a half step from A to B flat, a whole step from B flat to C, a whole step from C to D, a whole step from D to E, and a half step from E to F. We now have a new black key. This one is called B flat. It's not called A sharp since A sharp is already used when we went right in the circle of fifths. In other words, all the black keys have two names, one flat and one sharp. When we put all the flats into the circle of fifths, it looks like this. So remember this. 1. You get one U flat each time you transpose the diatonic scale going left on your keyboard. 2. You keep your previous flats when you add a new one. 3. It will always be the fourth note in the scale that is flattened. Let's get back to the basic jazz theory. I will show you all relevant theory and then I will give you exercises you can work on. So today we'll talk about harmony. And I don't know about you, but I love harmony. And harmony is, as you know, one of music's core elements. And since we are playing piano, we have extremely many opportunities. Like we've got 88 keys, we've got 10 fingers, hopefully, and a sustain pedal, and that equals extremely many possibilities to choose from, like no other instrument. Not only that, we'll have to learn to play the chords with the root and without the root. And we will learn many of the chords with both hands. Also, for example, C minor 7, you can play this in many, many ways. The way you play the chord is called voicing. Let me play the C minor 7 for you in 10 ways, 10 different voicings. When you play any chord, it's your choice as a jazz pianist to choose the voicing you feel is right for you. And here's a question for you. What should decide what kind of voicing you want to play? My first teacher, Doug Arneson, taught me one important thing. It is your ears that decides what you will play at any given time. And also think of chord symbols as suggestions of what to play. So, for example, if you are supposed to play a C7 chord, you might as well reharmonize that to something else, meaning you changed the chord. Just make sure you don't step on any toes like the bass players. And as I said before, you can choose between a ton of ways to play that chord, meaning you select what kind of voicing you want to play. However, the most common thing to do is to study conventions. Again, we need to study what others have done before us. In other words, it's an adaptation process. To study jazz, we need to work from two perspectives, from an inside-out perspective and from an outside-in perspective. And I will teach you more on this in a later lesson, but for now remember, inside-out perspective is when you copy from someone else and steal their ideas. Outside-in perspective is when you study musical aspects and apply that to the music. In my opinion, we definitely need both perspectives. In this course, we'll use both methods, so you have a lot to look forward to. As I said before, there are two main types of voicings you can put into any chord. a chord where you can play the root at the bottom of the chord, and another chord where you can play without the root, so-called rootless voicings. Before we have a look at the most famous chord progression in jazz, it's important to understand how the chords are related to the diatonic scale. Let's have a look at a basic triad. For example, the C chord. Let's say you play it in the key of C. The C chord would be the first chord. That's why we name it 1 with Roman numbers. And what do you think is the second chord in the key of C? That's correct. It's a D minor. In other words, you just move the triad around one step to the right within the key you're working in to get to the next step. Let's quickly have a look at all the steps in the key of C. Whoops, sorry, it's a D minor. In other words, you just move the triad around one step to the right within the key you're working in to get to the next step. Let's quickly have a look at all the steps in the key of C. Yeah, that was the steps in the key of C. Of course, when you play in the key of, for example, A, what would be the third chord in the key of A? Correct, it's a C sharp minor. Since the A scale has three sharps, C sharp, F sharp, and G sharp, the first chord then is A, second B minor, third C sharp minor. Whoops, no, it's a C sharp minor. Since the A scale has three sharps, C sharp, F sharp, and G sharp, the first chord then is A, second B minor, third C sharp minor. Let's have a look at a few chord progressions. And a chord progression is a series of chords. In the key of C, the chord progression 1, 6, 4, 5 would be C, A minor, F, and G. Let me play for you the famous 2-5-1 progression. And this chord progression is the most used in jazz, and it's a good place to start. So we start off from C, we count up 1, 2. And the second chord is a D minor. So we just move the C chord up a step. And the fifth chord is G. And that will sound like this: 2, 5, 1. But of course, it still sounds a bit boring the way I play, so let's add some more colors to it, and we'll add the seventh note. And that will sound like this: on the D minor 7 to G7, and then to C. Well, it sounds a little bit better. What about all those numbers? I'm sure you have seen all those strange looking chords with all sorts of numbers. I will teach you all of those in later lesson. But for today, let's make sure you understand the basics. Think of chords like a cake. On a cake, you have the bottom, the middle, and the juicy top. In other words, 3 layers. The chords are pretty much the same. You have the first layer, the second layer, and the third and juicy layer. Let's have a closer look. The first layer is like the bottom of the cake or the foundation in the house. In this case, the chord is a C. And as you probably know, the C contains the first, third, and fifth note from the diatonic scale. The second layer is, in this scenario, the major 7. But we think of the second layer like this. It includes every other key on the white keys in the key of C. In numbers, we have the first, third, and fifth. Then the second layer is 7th, 9th, 11th, and 13th note of the scale. And that's where it ends. If you go further up, you end up in the 15th note. That is the same as the first one. So when you combine the first and the second layer, it looks like this. The next thing we have is the third layer. As you see, we have used all the keys except for the black keys. And the black keys are included in what I call the third layer. This is what often is written in parentheses. And I will show you a lot more of the third layer later on. Back to the first and second layer. I should also say that the second layer also includes the minor 7. In C, that would be a B flat. Also, there are a lot of conventions in how and when to use all these ingredients, and I, of course, will show you all of these in the lessons to come. One of the things I'm really passionate about is practicing. But before we continue, I'd like to ask you, how much would you like to practice between each lesson? And please remember to consider your life situation before you answer. Thanks for your honest answers. Remember, this is not a competition in who can practice the most, and as I said, I'm really passionate about practicing, so I promise I'll teach you everything I know about practicing. Not only should we consider how much we should practice, but also how to practice, what to practice, and where and when to practice, and even why we should practice. And we'll discuss this in many future lessons too. Today, I will focus on the first one, and let's meet your PT, or practicing Thomas. This is Thomas, your personal trainer, or you can call him practicing Thomas. Thomas works in the factory. This is a job that he thinks is really boring. So all he can think of is to get home as fast as possible to practice piano, his favorite hobby. Then, when he gets home to practice, he's so eager to play that he literally tries to play everything he knows. Of course, he brings his phone and it constantly beeps. He's also thinking about what he will eat for dinner while Facebook alerts are ticking in and the time is just running away. So after his practice, he got really sad. No progression whatsoever. He started to think that he was worthless. His sadness slowly turned into anger. He got angry on himself for not getting any better playing piano. He also got angry at his piano teacher for not being good enough. In the middle of all his anger, a stick appeared. He said, "A stick?" Thomas was looking at the stick for a while. Suddenly, he realized everything. He realized that all he needed all along was a goal and a practicing plan. So he brought the stick to remind himself to stick to the plan. He also decided to get rid of distractions such as social media alerts, phones, and all his internal distractions. He also figured out 2 new ways to practice: the 25-50-25 method and just playing practicing. The 25-50-25 method means if he is practicing for 1 hour, he will be spending 25% of his time, 15 minutes, on warm-up exercises. The next 50% of his time he will spend on his short-term or long-term projects, also called main practicing. A short-term project could be something he will finish working on in 1 to 3 lessons. A long-term project is something he will finish after weeks or months. Then, as a bonus for himself, after he is done with his main practice, start practicing whatever he wants for the last 15 minutes or 25%. If you do the same, you'll get structure much better, a lot quicker, and a feeling of completion. Also, when you get good, you will want to come back to your piano. Since you easily get back to your piano, you'll get better and better. And the result, being able to play amazing music. Next time Thomas came home from work, he had a practicing plan and he brought the dog he found in the park as well as a stick to remind himself to stick to the plan. All made him improve a lot. Then
suddenly.
Yeah, that was practicing Thomas. He will show up every now and then with some great practicing tips. There's a huge difference to your progress if you do have a plan and stick to it or not. I played for many years without any specific directional plan and I wasted a lot of valuable time. So I will help you out with a plan for what to practice between each lesson. Again, the idea is to help you get as good as you want as fast as possible. It will take time to get good. Many of my students, especially adult students, are surprised of how long time it takes to get good. It takes time for everyone. Also, if you want to have muscles, it doesn't help you to show up at the gym. You need to do the work. You need to take action to become better. I can only show you what and how to practice to get from where you are to where you want to be the shortest way possible. Also, in this course, you decide the tempo. So people are different. Some of you will find this course a bit hard sometimes, and some of you will find it too easy sometimes. Either way, let's evaluate how this went next lesson after you've practiced. And enough talk. Let's head over to the piano and see what to practice for next lesson. Let's go ahead and practice some specific voicings that you can use on a dominant 7th chord. And this dominant 7th chord is so much played in jazz, so it's really good to get this into your fingers. And if you play jazz piano, it's very common to skip the 5th note of the dominant 7 because that's 1, 3, 5, and 7. That will be a dominant 7th chord. But this particular voicing will be without the 5th. Because it's very good to combine this one with other things in your right hand. So we'll work on this in later lesson, but I'll just show you now. See, I'm using the 1, 3, and 7. So this was an E flat 7. So what you do specifically is to practice this into 3 steps. And this is a 3-step process that we'll use a lot in this course. So it's playing this chord chromatically. Just keep on playing like this. Whatever finger you feel is comfortable. So chromatically up and down, an octave. And then there is something called the whole tone scale, which is just whole tones. Sounds like a fairy tale. So we're going to play this chord within the whole tone scale. And of course you play it very slow at first, then you're using your metronome. And you can practice this together with me in the practicing together part. And there are 2 whole tone scales, so you need to practice this from C and from D flat. So this is a D flat. And then the third and last step is to practice the chord within the circle of fifths. And that will be like this. You could go up to an F, or you can go up to a G, and so on. So that's 3 steps to practice this chord. You do that, and next time we'll expand on this. Let's play some scales. If you want to play piano well, it's so much more easy for you if you know your scales. and I played for many years without knowing my scales, and there's a huge difference if you do know them and if you don't. So in this course, we'll work on the scales, and I will also teach you how you can use all these scales in improvisation, of course, because that's what's really interesting. But before that, it's nice to prepare your fingers so they're ready for what to come. So we'll play the simple C scale first, and we'll do it in this way. We'll play it up 2 octaves from the middle C, and the right fingering should be 1, 2, 3, and you take your thumb under 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, and then it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just the opposite, the other direction. And see if you can play it even like this. And then for your left hand, so that's step 1. You play that up and down with your right hand, and with your left hand you play it down and up. Same fingering. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the same way the other way. Remember, there is no interest. You don't impress anyone if you can play this fast if you don't also can play it very slow. So make sure you do it very correct. And then you do it with both hands. Always 2 octaves. And then the tricky part, same way, because then you need to change in different places. So that was 4 steps, and of course you can practice this together with me in the playing together or practicing together part. And there's another scale I want to teach you today, which probably is a bit more interesting for some of you, and that is the chromatic scale. The chromatic scale is like this. So it's 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So what I suggest you do is you just go over the whole piano, and when you know how to do it slow, of course it's slow at first, then you can challenge yourself to see if you can get it faster. But that's only if you warmed up. So practice very slow at first, and then increasing the speed. And only with your right hand at this time. We'll do the left hand later on. And you might ask, why would I do this? Yeah, because it's so much. You can use that in so many styles in jazz. So if you want to play like a ballad, of course you don't play like I do now. You will of course combine it with different things as well. So if I play and also if you want to play like bebop, cool stuff with just a chromatic scale. So practice the C scale and the chromatic scale for next time, and you can play it together with me. Let's head over to the piano and play once more the chord progression 2-5-1. Like this, in the key of C. And it's a D minor 7 to G7 to C. And what we'll do is to play, instead of playing the chord with the root at the bottom, like this, we now will play rootless voicing. So we play like this. And now we also add the ninth note of the scale. So instead of playing the root, we now play the ninth. So it will be first in our left hand, and then we play in the right hand the third, fifth, seventh, and ninth. And just by moving one finger, you will play a G7 with a 13 and a 9. So see that? I'm playing the D7, D minor 7 with a 9 to G13 with a 9th and a 13. And what we'll do is to move this chord just down one step within the key you're playing in. So now I was playing in the key of C, and now black key, so it will just be to move the whole thing down one step, like this. Next thing we'll do is to transpose the whole thing. So we're going coming from C 6-9 to C minor 9, and then just move one finger also here to this chord called F7 with a 13 and a 9, and then this chord, which is the B flat 6-9. So take it once more from the top. It will be like this, and we continue. 2-5-1 to B flat, 2-5-1 to A flat, and now it's getting too dark, I think, so it's a good place to transpose everything up an octave, like this. 2-5-1 to G flat, and then we have 2-5-1 to E, and we have 2-5-1 to D again. And your job is to get this into your fingers as good as you can, so you don't have to think about it. Because these chords we will use a lot in this course, and of course in jazz piano in general. And as you know, we have two hands, and now we played it with our right hand. So next step then is to play it with your left hand. So what you do is to play like this, and since we don't have a bass player right now, we need to sing the root note. And if I can sing, I guess you can sing. So I'll try to sing this. It will be 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1. And if I'm correct now, I should be at A flat. So I'll double check that. And then we transpose the whole thing up. It's getting dark for your voice, I guess, so you can transpose your voice up as well. There you have it. And this chord, as I said before, we'll use this a lot, both when we are playing solo jazz and with band. So if I was playing that was A voicings and B voicings, which we'll talk about later. So next step is to play the whole thing with the band. And I added some drums, bass drums, and that will sound like this. We're getting close to the end of your first lesson, and I hope you liked it. I'm always doing my best to create the best course possible for you where you can learn the most and also get enough time to work on all I give you. Feel free to go through everything a couple of times to make sure you get everything right. Repetition is good. Then, eventually, you can jump right to the practicing together part. This is where you actually sit down to practice what you learn, and for some of this, you might even practice together with me. Again, remember the 25-50-25 formula? By following this method, and if you stick to the plan, you will get good results a lot quicker than without this plan. I will elaborate more on this next week. For those of you who are Gold members, feel free to submit a ticket in the Gold members support area, and I will personally answer as many questions as possible, and some of them will be answered by my great team of qualified teachers. Also, for Gold members, I will show you how you can get personal rating next lesson. For your next lesson, think about what is your goal with your music? What do you hope to achieve and by when? Also, I would like you to take a note on how long time you practice the material I've shown you for today's lesson. In next week's lesson, we'll continue working on what is swing, more on the cool chords, a blues where you can use some of the new chords. And before I say goodbye, how would you rate this lesson on a scale from C to G, where G is the best, C is the worst? Thanks for your feedback. I'm going to leave you with this quote by the American author Henry van Dyke. Use what talents you possess. The woods will be very silent if no birds sang there except those that sang best. I will see you soon. Take care of your music. One, two, three, four, 2, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4.